think I'll make that 7:30. So if anyone else joins, I'll let them in. So welcome to this evening's talk. I'm Mark Roberts. I'm the membership marketing and recruitment manager and also the event coordinator for the trust. So like I said, there's a few of you in the chat who already know me and going through the names already. Paul's recognized a few of you in there already as well. So welcome to this evening's talk. Like I said before, we will be recording this, so I've put everyone on mute and I've turned everyone's camera off, but the chat will be open throughout the talk. So if you've got any questions or anything you want to ask, please put it into the chat. We will do some questions at the end, or I may interject throughout the talk if it's a relevant question there and there, but I don't want to kind of put Paul off his flow when he goes through his talk. So, sorry, just someone else joining. So, yeah, welcome to tonight's talk, which will be about the reserves that Paul Furnborough manages up in the northeast of Wales. Well, I'll just pass you over to Paul, mate. You can go through exactly what you're going to be talking to. So, you're on mute at the moment. There we go. Yeah.
There we go. No worries. Can I just check before I get started? So my screen is sharing. Is that right?
Yep.
But it's not showing the row of
Nope.
Participants.
Nope. It's just your screen, mate. I can see.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you everyone who's joining us tonight. So I'll be giving a reasonably short overview of this year 2023 across the reserves which I manage, and it's really mostly a photo essay. I've avoided text wherever I can, so you're stuck with a combination of photos and my voice. So
before we start, Paul, sorry,
yep.
How long have you been with the trust now?
So I've just been with us just over 2 years now, so I can't quite get away with playing the newbie card anymore. It's not quite as I could last time.
And how many reserves do you manage then up in the northeast?
So I've got 8 or sort of 7.5 because of how we share Aberdeen.
Yeah. So you've got 7.5 out of the 35 that we manage across North Wales.
Yeah. So I've got a map early doors showing where we're talking about.
Oh, superb. Well, I'll let you get on then, Paul. I'll be here if there's any problems, and I'll please, like I said, if anyone's got any questions for Paul, stick it into the chat, and I will then present them to Paul either throughout the presentation or at the end, seeing how we get on. Okay, then. All right, Paul. I'll jump off now, mate. Okay, I'm still here though.
All right, fab. I'll click in. Okay, so my opening slide, just for context, it shows the spread of reserves that we've got across North Wales. We've got 35 reserves, I think, across the team. We're split into east and west. So Jordan and myself cover the east, and Matt and Luke cover the west. If we zoom in just on the east over here, I've pulled up the reserves with their names, and these ones are along the south, along sort of Wrexham and South Denbighshire are Jordan's. These ones along the Llwydians are mine, and then we've got these two that don't quite fit the tidy spread. So Blaenau Wirglodd is one of Jordan's, and Gors is one of mine. But there's other than those two sort of anomalies, sort of out in the western reaches of our area, we've got a sort of a fairly reasonable geographic split there, and we both work over at Aberdeen. So I've just zoomed in a little bit more here, and it's with the terrain map here, you can see that most of my reserves here basically follow the line of the mountains there. They follow the Llwydian up from Aberdeen up through Coed y Felin, Coed Trachiniau, Thol, Igraig, Maes Hiredig, and Big Poolwood up at the top. And then down there on the bottom left, we've got Gors Llwyd, just just on the shores there of Finbrennig. So this presentation, I was asked to do a recap of the year of 2023, and I thought I would do it by season. So I'm starting at the beginning and I'm ending at the end. So the reserves, the activities across the reserves are sort of splattered throughout it, because we'll dip in and dip out across the reserves as we go through the seasons. So opening up in winter, starting with Gors Maen Llwyd, which really captures the essence of winter. I've just got a few images looking across it in the snow on this occasion. You can see the wind farm in the background there. As we go in, you can see it changing from the clear, clean blue skies to heavy snow here. This is the one site where I've been where I've experienced just the weather changing on a sixpence. It's just it's cold, like on these photos, but clear skies, and then out of nowhere just turns into blizzard conditions, and then clear skies again. So but very, very exposed, and always its own sort of not microclimate, but it's got its own little sort of climatic feel out there. You
Isn't
can
it
see
about 800? Sorry, Paul. Is it about 800 meters up as well? Isn't it? It's quite high windswept as Gors, isn't it?
it's not that high. It's about 400 meters.
Is it
So
400s?
yeah, but it is. I mean, it is high ground, certainly for out in the east. It's high, but it's exposed, which is the thing you notice when you're out there.
Well, I've spent many an afternoon or day opposite there at the Osprey Lookout on the other side of Kinbrennig, and when the wind picks up there, it can get quite bad, can't it?
Yeah, it certainly can. So, but we tend to go out sort of pretty much regardless of the weather. We just wrap up and brave the conditions. So when we're up there over winter, our primary job is controlling Sitka. So in fact, if I click onto the previous slide, you can see in the background there these big stands of Sitka. So those are forestry plantations that are they're off the reserve, but they're a big seed source that blows onto the reserve. And then these sort of tall trees that you see in the midground or the foreground there, those are ones that we're tackling. So you can see that they're sort of reasonably spaced out. The density isn't too high, but on this part of the reserve where it's closest to the forestry and the prevailing wind just brings the seeds in, we did have some quite large trees here to deal with. So the work on the Sitka, it's sort of two-pronged. The sort of largest component of that is going out with teams of volunteers, and the more the merrier, because we're trying to spread out across, cover as much land as we can, and where there's a little sapling, if we can pull it out, we'll pull it. If we can't, if it needs cutting, we'll snip it down below the first branches. This type of tree, if you cut it low enough, it doesn't coppice, it doesn't regrow, it will kill it. So that means we don't need to use herbicide to stump treat. We can just pull it or snip it. As they get bigger, then we'll cut them with pruning saws or bow saws, and then as they scale up, we'll cut them with chainsaws. So you can see again on this picture, you can see in the background the spread of trees, and those are the larger ones which you can see sort of more easily from a distance, and they are all over. It is extensive, but it's not terribly dense, so we are able to cover quite a bit of ground. The other prong of work that we do here is working with contractors to fell some of the bigger trees. It just speeds up the work that we do. I've discovered the most efficient way to manage this task across the site is we want to go out with a group of volunteers, ideally a big group. We'll support that team with a few chainsaw operators, and where the trees are a little bit bigger and it's not efficient to cut them down by hand, we'll cut them down with chainsaws, but we'll sort of try and spread across the reserve, cover a big area and sort of spread over it like locusts, rather than focusing on like one tight cluster of big dense trees that are sort of harder going to get through. Instead, I'll put my contractors onto the biggest sections, and they can tear those down much more efficiently, much more quickly, and then we can process on from there. And that's an A4 pad, just showing for scale one of the larger trees that was taken down. There's not very many that get to that size, and we've tackled most of those truly big ones now. So most of the ones we're dealing with are up to about 15 or 18 years old, but yeah, these ones closest to the seed source, there were some larger ones there. And this map I've put up because when I first went out onto site 2 years ago with Jordan, and he was showing me the site and he was telling me sort of how we manage it and what we do. And it's 280 hectares, so it's a big site. It's the biggest one that the trust owns. And he was saying we go out with teams of volunteers and we pull up Sitka spruce, and I was looking around me, and like there was spruce everywhere, and the site was huge, and it just seemed like madness. It seemed like how could you conceivably try and tackle something on this scale, having done it now for a couple of years, and having had the opportunity to bring staff teams in where we join up with staff and volunteers and trainees from the West as well, and to have a big push at it with these big groups and the joint groups of the East volunteers and the West, and multiple chainsaws, and also getting contractors involved to tackle some of the bigger stuff. The areas in purple we covered in the first sort of year and a half, the first sort of 2 winter seasons there, and the area in blue there is an area that I'm hoping to get covered this year. So we've started tackling it, and I think we'll get through that. And the reason I've sort of highlighted these areas is because what I'm hoping to do, what I'm planning to do, is to try and cover about 1/6 of the reserve each year if we can, which means that on a 6-year cycle or a 7-year cycle, we'll be back to where we started. So we'll be back to the purple areas, and if we can control all the small growth, all the seedlings that are coming in that period, and if we can hit the bigger stuff with the help of contractors, then we're on top of it. Then we can manage this smaller stuff with hand tools, and we can stay on top of it. So it just means every winter when we've got the work season, we don't need to worry about disturbing nesting birds. We just need to really keep the foot on the gas, have a session every month, and make sure we're always out there, always promoting it, always trying to get as many people out as we can, and just stay on top of it. And I think just looking at the map there and showing the coloured areas of what we've done in purple and what I hope to cover in blue there, I think something along those lines is achievable, which is, I mean, it's staggering when you think of the size of the site. So that was quite sort of exciting to map out.
Paul, why are we removing the spruce?
So we're removing the spruce because it's in effect it's an invasive non-native, so it grows very dominantly in this habitat. I have a feeling it's Norwegian in origin. It's planted in these plantations because it grows well in these harsh conditions, and it grows quickly. So it's a useful timber product for the land. But the habitat type that we're managing here on Gors is heathland, and that's a priority habitat. It's it's a relatively rare habitat, and so it's one that we need to try and maintain. And if you don't manage it, it will succeed to woodland, and in this context, with the seed source being Sitka, it would succeed to Sitka woodland. And I was actually, can you see my mouse, or is it not showing?
Yeah, I can see it, mate. Sorry. Yeah.
So just sort of to the south of the reserve, sort of along here on the Dŵr Cymru edge of the lake. I was out on a site visit a few weeks ago looking at a possible conservation grazing project that Dŵr Cymru were looking at setting up. And you could see there was an edge habitat there where there was a really curious sort of secondary woodland growing with willow and Sitka being the two dominant species, and birch probably being the third, and then amongst it gorse and bramble on the understory. But underneath all that, you could see that it was heathland. You could see all the heather and moss underneath it. So that was along the lake edge, and it would all have been naturally self-seeded stuff that's gotten in there. I should have taken a photo, but that was a really interesting sort of I guess like vision of a dystopian future for what would happen if you didn't manage the site, if you didn't graze it, and you didn't control the seed blow coming in. And I think the fact that there was even some deciduous trees in the mix is in a way quite positive, because on the main reserve, on our site, there's a few very, very windswept looking rowan trees that are just about hanging on, but outside of the planted woodland up here in the top corner, there's really there's not much tree life there other than Sitka. So yeah, we're just trying to control it out because it's not the priority habitat here. So oh, hang on. So this area here that I've highlighted in red is quite interesting, because it's that shows the boundary of our land and Dŵr Cymru, and there's this plot of forestry here, and Dŵr Cymru have got quite a bit of plantation land around the lake, which sort of seems like an unusual enterprise for a water company, but it's simply because when they bought the land around the lake, when once the lake was filled and it was serving its purpose, this excess land that they had around it, the forestry is a way to recoup some of the losses. But fortunately for us, Nick Kite, who's the manager on the site there, is quite conservation minded, and they are now so that area on that aerial photo, if I take the circle off, you can see that that's all tree cover. That's now all been harvested, and you can see the scale of harvesting here. So just stacks and stacks and stacks of these logs, and this shot here is from the southern edge of the reserve. So the lake is just behind me, and you can see the sort of you can see the boundary of the land. You can see the habitat change from the sort of quite open heath here, quite a grassy heath, and then you can see the rows where the trees have been felled from the plantation land, and that is now, it is going to be replanted, but it's going to be replanted with native broadleaf, which will be much less impactful on the reserve. So that's a really positive change to the reserve from just from how our neighbours are managing their land. So that's really encouraging, and we've done a big push in this area to remove Sitka from our land. So that's going to help with the seed source in there as well. So another important project that we've restarted this winter at Gors Llwyd was the heather cutting. So again, large scale project, required machinery going with contractors and tractors. You can see in the background a square that's been cut. In the foreground, you can see the cut heather. You can see it more clearly. This is to improve the structure of the heath, so that we have areas that have got regrowth and pioneer growth, and then young and maturing heather next to the old and spreading and senescing heather. So by having that more diverse structure, it will encourage a more diverse wildlife to use it. What we've discovered this year, following discussion and feedback with partners, with NRW and RSPB, so we're going to reduce the size of these squares that were cut. So the idea was originally we would cut a square like this here, and then we'd skip a patch, and then we cut another square, skip a patch, and cut another square, and on a cycle we'd come back to this area where we'd been cutting patches, cut one nearby, and so we would have a rotation of about 4 years to come back to the area where we're cutting patches, and then about 15 years to come back and cycle through. So this patch that's been cut first, next time we cut a patch here, this will be 5 years worth of growth. When we come back again, it'll be 12 years of growth, and 4 years on the first one, and so on. So we've got that system now up and running. We've restarted the heather cutting after a bit of disruption with COVID and staff changes, and that's going well, and we're able to refine it and adjust it as we go on. So switching sites now to Big Pool Wood. So the winter season is a cutting season. It's when we can be sort of most not destructive, but sort of what would appear to be destructive, because it's the dormant season. So we avoid nesting birds. It's a good time for going in ponds with less disturbance there as well. So Big Pool Wood across the winter, a lot of reed cutting is done. This photo is a few years old. It's an aerial photo from a drone from a lad called Ben Parry, who took this photo. But you can see the area in front of the hide here that was cut, and this area here in front of another hide here that was cut, opening up to the island. You've got the pond dipping platform area over here, and this year I've learned how to fly our trust drones, and got the little ticket to do so. So I think this will be a good way to monitor the areas that we cut each year. So probably around end of February, I'll take the drone up, I'll send it up, and we'll get a refreshed photo of Big Pool Wood and see all the reed cutting that we've done. Whilst I've got this photo up, actually, we also do we've been doing some tree cutting on site, some selective thinning. And you can see the difference in density if you look along this poolside edge, just on the top of the photo there, with the woodland behind it on the other side of the track. You can see how much denser it is on the other side, and how much more ground you're seeing, how much more light is getting into the ground there. So there's just been a slow program of selective thinning just to open up the woodland there, take out predominantly sycamore, which is a very shading species, And that shows through then on the ground flora as well, which on the north side there, where it's very dense and shaded, it's very ivy dominated, which again is a species that will tolerate the deep shade, but it does also smother out a lot of other species. Whereas you've got a much more diverse wildflower mix in the open area there. Yeah, so we've also been very lucky at Big Pool Wood to be working in partnership with Cheshire Wildlife Trust on a project that they are coordinating, which has given us a bit of funding. So we bought, I think, 9 rolls of this welded wire mesh netting to redo our non-slip surfacing on the boardwalk here. So you can see we've got a panel missing, and you've got these grippy strips on the boardwalk that was starting to wear out a bit. So we've refreshed that, and I don't know how many meters of it is. It's I think they were 30-meter rolls, and I think we had 9 of them. So you can do the maths. I'm not going to embarrass myself doing it on air. But that's a lot of work that's gone into getting these tacked on along the boardwalk. And it is, I think, our most accessible reserve, certainly in the northeast, in my patch of 8, and I think probably in the northeast overall. We've got this circular walk now that goes all around the site. It's pretty flat, it's wheelchair accessible, and I mean, a lot of reserves by their nature, you look at Maen Llwyd, are very rugged. They're quite out of the way, they're difficult to access, and this reserve is just wonderful for access. So it's a real resource there.
Paul, on that note, I was just going to mirror exactly what you said. I remember going down there about 4.5 years ago, because I joined the trust 5 years ago, and going down there, and I remember getting halfway down one side and I had one of the pram and just not being able to get any further. But now, like exactly like you said, you can get all the way around it in a wheelchair. It's a fabulous place to visit, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, when I joined 2 years ago, it was already I mean, it was clearly a very accessible site, and what we've done here is just sort of maintenance and enhancement of an existing thing. But it was a volunteer, Roger Riley, who passed away fairly recently, about a year ago, I think now, and it was his vision that sort of picked it up from a like a very overgrown and quite sort of swampy and wet site where you couldn't get around it. And so, like, by the time I sort of helicoptered in 2 years ago, a lot of work had already been done here. I was looking through photos when I was putting this presentation together, and I came across some of the photos from when the boardwalk was originally put up. So an awful lot of work has gone into this site over the last sort of 10 years or so, and it you know, it shows. And now, I mean, it still absorbs an awful lot of work. We've got a volunteer team that's based out of Big Pool Wood, and then we supplement that with support from the Tuesday team. So we try and do monthly sessions there over winter, and then probably another 3 sessions or so over spring and summer. So a lot of personnel is going to the site still, just on maintaining. So going back, like just maintaining the footpaths open, and these open sections in the reeds, so you can see out from the bird heights, and I mean, it's the local team that look after the bird feeders there, and just there's so much work that goes into the site, and it's unique amongst my sites in that we do have this local team to really help keep on top of it. We've got another site at Gors where I've got a local warden who does an awful lot of work on the site as well. But it's, I mean, yeah, like if we captured all the hours of work done there, it'd be immense. So And I mean, a little slide here illustrating the tree cutting that I mentioned earlier on the aerial photo. And then sort of skipping around sites again. So part of the winter programme is coppicing. This photo is taken at Aberdeen. It's an area here where we've got these sort of young ash trees, and this is an after photo from I think about 6 months after. You can see you've got the regrowth coming from the base, but also we laid a sort of dead hedging, the brash that came out from the cutting. So we focused on this patch because it was a south facing slope on an area of that connected two known bits of lizard habitat. So it probably was being used as a corridor by common lizards, but we weren't getting records from along there, and it would have been quite shaded. So this has opened it up. It gives them nice sunning areas that they can bask in. Because this photo doesn't show it, but we cut like a scallop, a D-shaped cut out of the sort of tree area there, and then we've edged it with this dead hedging. So whatever time of day, when the sun's coming down, there'll be somewhere that they can bask on this dead hedging or amongst this regrowth, and then can still scutter off to safety if they feel threatened. And there's a little map here that you can see that we use for monitoring, which I'll touch on it later on in the talk. So some more coppicing here. This is from Coedrichinii. You can just about see sort of through the hazel stalls here. There's some, I think it's actually blackthorn rather than hawthorn, but there's this thorn hedge that's really struggling on the edge of the reserve there. It was getting shaded out a lot from trees over the top and from the hazel along here, and it was quite leggy and it wasn't sort of developing very thick. So we've gone in, and this much more sort of traditional coppicing, I suppose, on a shorter cycle. So the ash trees that I showed you earlier would be sort of taking them down from maidens. This is just regenerating that cycle. It's going to let more light into the hedge that's just sort of off screen on the right there. The hazel should grow alongside it, and then we'll be able to do some hedge laying on this site in probably about 5 years' time. I had anticipated doing some this last winter, but once we got in and stuck in, I could see that the quality of the hedge wasn't quite there. So we just need to do a bit of regeneration work first. So yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of my reserves. All my reserves really have got an element of woodland, and so coppicing is something that we do across quite a few of them, just as a regeneration process. On a similar theme, there's been quite a lot of ash dieback work that we've had to do. Now the thinking on ash dieback has evolved over the last few years. So sort of we've seen the wave of it come in across the country, and initially we were sort of all looking at biosecurity protocols and trying not to spread it, and then it became clear that it was endemic and it was pretty much everywhere. So then we're starting to look for trees that have some resilience and that might be able to stay. And like initially there were thoughts, well, I mean, trees are going to have to come down just across the estates, just wipe out. But actually we're quite fortunate in a way in how the disease, what the symptoms of it are, because it spreads, the spores spread and enter the trees through the leaves, and then the harm that they cause is through like a constriction of the like the what they call, like the phloems and the xylem, like the connective like the vessels through the tree. And so as they constrict, it means that water and nutrients can't get to the extremities, because it has the biggest impact on where these connections are smallest, and there isn't sort of backup. So first you get sort of the twigs getting constricted around the crown. That's why you see the effect of the dieback being the leaf loss and the dead twigs around the outside. Then they'll start to shed, so you'll lose your little twigs first, and the dieback will spread sort of further along the deeper into the crown of the tree, and then it will shed those as well, and eventually the fungus spreads down the trunk of the tree. And when we do safety felling, and you can see when you cut it at the base, very often the base is clear, and as we portion it up, as we sort of cross cut it or salami cut it, working our way up, you'll see the bottom section is actually clean, good wood. And you can see sort of at some point, you can see in the cross section the discoloration of the fungi in the wood, and it's working its way down from the top. And then sometimes what you'll see as well is down near the base, you'll see some rot down at the base, and then a gap and more rot further up. And usually what that indicates is a secondary infection that's gotten in at the base, and it's that infection that will really knock the tree over, because as it sheds its limbs from the top, it actually becomes less dangerous in a way, because there's less tree to catch the wind. You've not got the leaves there for sail effect, but it's the rot at the base which will cause it to tip. So because of that sort of progression, we've been able to get specialist surveyors out last winter to do ash dieback surveys for us. And we can basically take we don't need to take down as many trees as we had initially anticipated. If the tree, it's only really if the tree is right next to a high risk area that it needs managing. And if it does need managing, where we've got the opportunity to, we don't necessarily want to fell it either. We want to still retain the tree. So Coed y Felin, where we've done a lot of ash dieback work this last winter, because the reserve runs, it's a great long strip running along the Mold Denby Road, and that's a high risk target. But what we've been able to do is along a lot of that length is, rather than fill the trees, we've reduced them down to about 4 meters. We've left sort of a totem pole, and you can see this year, you can see some regrowth from that. So we've in effect pollarded them, and while I don't expect them to hang on terribly long, it's made them safe. And if they do die, then we've still got our standing deadwood habitat there. So we've been able to sort of take a much more conservation focused approach to this health and safety issue of the ash dieback, which is obviously for a wildlife trust a really positive development to be able to take. And this photo I thought I put in because I thought it illustrated it quite nicely, because we've got this very big, very mature ash tree growing alongside the road there, and like for scale, up here on the top of the cherry picker, that orange coloration there is the chainsaw operator. So that's a person up there. So it's a big mature tree that we wouldn't want to fell. We'd want to retain it, and it's still alive. I mean, it's suffering from dieback, but it's still got potentially some years left in it. So we're able to reduce it down, take off the dead, take it back to safe points, do this crown reduction. We still need to monitor it. It's still infected. We still need to watch it for signs of deterioration. But in the meantime, we're able to retain it as a living resource, and eventually as a dead resource as well, as a standing deadwood. So yeah, it's just really positive that despite having to do all this work for health and safety, and despite it sort of meaning a lot of tree felling and a lot of tree work, we have been able to sort of maximize the wildlife value there and minimize the loss, which yeah, it's sort of the best approach we could take to the problem. So we also did this is an ash tree, a very large mature ash. It's probably about 1.5 meters, couple of meters in diameter, and it's got this big gnarly tear. You can see the rip on the bark there. You can see this bulging on the left hand side there, which is compensating for a lot of weight from a limb that's sort of off screen, that's reaching out towards the road. And it was a big mature tree close to the road, but with this big obvious defect quite near the base. And we actually went in and did this sonic telemetry on it, where we got a specialist in. They put these 12 sort of audio devices. They tacked them onto the tree, and then sort of from the high tech to the low tech, he then hit it with a hammer. And these devices, they're hooked up, they're wired up to a computer, and so you could see like you could see the tree on this sort of sonogram on the computer. And we took two readings. We took one at this height here, sort of couple of meters high. We took one down at the base around the roots, and from that we were able to see sort of where the faults were in the tree, how robust it looked, and indeed this one we were able to retain. We didn't fell this one. We did some fairly substantial reductions to the limbs, but I think it's still got many years left in it. Touch wood. Certainly there's no indication that it would come down, just sort of having taken that weight off it now. So so we were able to sort of use these more technical approaches to assess, in this case, this sort of particularly high value tree. So we also had some grazing over winter. So this image is from Coed y Felin, where we were able to get cattle in to graze the small paddock by the small car park. I was hoping to get sheep in to graze the other end of the reserve near the larger parking, but unfortunately on the day the grazier came to check the site out for bringing the sheep on, there was a professional dog walker with the 6 or 7 dogs and not on lead, and that quite understandably spooked him, and he wasn't prepared to bring his livestock on with that sort of level of non-compliance to the dogs on lead policy for the reserves. So unfortunately it went without grazing, which is a shame, because that bit of the reserve in particular is where the calcareous grassland is strongest, and it's where we've got the Deptford pinks, and they really do need the disturbance and that thatch layer removing. So I'm going to try and get the sheep in this winter, but yeah, it wasn't straightforward. This is an old photo. It's a different set of cows to the ones we had on at Aberdeen this year. I couldn't find a new one, but we've got grazing across quite a few of our reserves, and it's basically a key management tool for grassland, for removing nutrients. Just everything that goes into biomass on the cows and is taken off site is nutrients that's removed. It just means then that you are encouraging a much more diverse sward rather than just a dominance of the rougher grasses. So it was quite a long winter. It was a sort of Game of Thrones winter. We're into spring, and spring has a change of pace, because we're outside of we're now coming into nesting season. So across a few of the reserves, we've been sprucing up the signage at the entrances there. We've got these new threshold panels that tell you where you are, that you're on a trust reserve, give you a little bit of information about it. The idea is it's just bright and eye-catching. You know where you are. There'll be more information on leaflets. I need to install the leaflet holders onto these. Pointing at the screen, can't see. But I need to install the leaflet holders onto the timber uprights here. Yeah, it's just. I mean, a few of the reserves like Maes Heretig didn't have signage at the entrance, and Igraig didn't either. So it's just obviously if we go into a reserve and we know where it is and we're going there intentionally, we know about it. But a lot of people will just be walking routes and will encounter the reserves and wouldn't necessarily know that they're there otherwise. So I think these are, I mean, they're just very visually eye-catching. So we've been installing those. I also had some funding for Dhol, so I got this outdoor work area installed, so we can use this as a base now, and like especially sort of post-COVID, it means we don't have to be using the indoor workshop. We can use the space outdoors as well, and sort of straight away it got put to use with this bat box building project. We'd had some timbers stored in Dhol for years and years from the Llwyd back group, and they were keen for us to put it to use and actually build these bat boxes. You can see a lot of flat packs here, and we had a production line going, and I don't know if there's any of my team in the presentation today, but we've spent a lot of sessions on building and improving and fixing bat boxes, and some of them have been going up as well. So we've installed them at Dhol, so where we've been building them, we've installed them now. But I need to get them up across most of the reserves now to either supplement the ones we've got, or to replace old ones where they are starting to rot and lose their integrity, or just to get new ones up. And it's particularly sort of important, I suppose, in a way, that when we're losing some of the trees that have got the most interesting features for bats, with the diseased trees and the trees with the nooks and the holes and the cracks and the crannies, and like the things that are points of weakness and a concern from a health and safety perspective, if we're having to manage those out along the footpaths and along the key safety areas, to be able to replace that habitat with alternatives to the bats is quite important. And because we don't know quite what conditions they're going to prefer on any given site, and so we put quite a lot up. So we'll put them up in groups of 3 facing different directions, and then they'll all warm differently, and the temperature and the humidity inside the boxes will be a little bit different between them, and it just gives them the most, collectively, the most chance to be used. We've also been refreshing the dormouse boxes at Dhol. So historically, there was a dormouse population not just on the Dhol Reserve, but in the wider woodland area around there, in that sort of Cerwis area. But we've not had any monitoring there for about 10 years, and so the first sort of first part of restarting that monitoring was just, again, taking out the old rotted and damp boxes and replacing them with these new fresh boxes. I haven't actually managed to get my surveys up and running this year yet. We have done a lot of new surveys, but they are on the list to make sure we get up and running for next year, and we've started the work on getting the infrastructure ready with these boxes. And then we've put them up, they're numbered, they're labelled, and then they're mapped on GIS as well, so we can find them again. And the boxes, they're just like bird boxes, except you put the hole on the wrong side. You put the hole on the back side, as it were, and you've got these little sort of nooks or grooves just to hold them sort of slightly proud of the tree, so the mouse can climb up behind it and doesn't have to go around the front where it would be a bit more exposed. Although I understand the first dormouse that was found on the site was actually found in a bird box, so they'll use what they use. But we've given them the best chances now with clean, dry boxes. So we also did our annual newt surveys. You'll see now we've moved into spring. We're moving very much into survey season. So the two sites that of mine that we monitor, well, there's Aberdeener, that is sort of mine and Jordan's, and Thol. So we go out at night with our torches. We've got this survey sheet you see there on the right that we tally up the different newts that we find. We've got a cockchafer there that we just, the timing was just right. I think they're Maybugs, I think they're called as well. So our April-May surveys coincided with them, and they were sort of dive bombing our torches and where the torches hit the water as well. So this one here, it's a crested newt. You can see from the warty skin, there's sort of all the sort of pimples on it, and you can see the sort of white acne that you get sort of biased along the lower flanks there, and the nice orange rings on the toes there, fingers and toes. So nice crested newts. We also did our black grouse surveys. So this is up at Gors Llwyd, up on our big heathland site, and this was done in partnership with NRW and RSPB, and just for context, to orientate yourself, so Llwyd is sort of centre or centre right slightly on this map. All these areas of blue are compartments that were surveyed. Gors Llwyd is compartment 11, which is inside this red circle here. So Gors Llwyd, which is 280 hectares, so a big old site, is just one of 16 compartments that are monitored. So that was quite exciting to go out and do that sort of alongside colleagues and partners on other sides. And we did that. We've had a lot of investment on Gors Llwyd recently, and so we were able to invite public along to help with these surveys. We split up into 4 groups, I think. We're able to walk 4 different transects all on the same night or morning. It was 4 a.m. that we met up there and went out, and we found our grouse. We found male grouse and female grouse. So yeah, an exciting project to be a part of. We also this year have been trying to jumpstart our survey efforts a bit more widely. So we've got these sort of long-term monitoring projects that often in partnership with other organisations, but we don't do nearly as much wildlife monitoring on our reserves as we would like to. So we were able to do reptile training and dragonfly training as well, and we've started up a survey group volunteer or a survey volunteer group to try and just roll out more monitoring across the reserves. So taking us into summer, so there's sort of a smooth transition into summer. One of the first things that we did was we had a team going out and trying to get boots on the ground pretty much every day over June, when was the sort of key flight period for the small pearl-bordered fritillary over at Aberdeener Reserve, because we've got records of them, but not for a few years. So we wanted to see if they were still around. So we started off. We did a visit to a nearby site on Hendra. We found one there, so we knew what we were looking for. We got our eye in. We confirmed that was the right species, and then we had a group that would self-organize and go out onto site, and we were out for a month trying to track them down. We didn't find them this year. Doesn't mean they're not there, but we didn't find them. But this is sort of a real targeted species targeted survey, and it's absolutely what we should be doing where we've got key species like this. We were also sort of partly on the back of that, we were able to set up a new butterfly monitoring transect at Coed y Felin. So we've already got a transect at Aberdeen, which is monitored by a volunteer. We've expanded that to a second transect, and we've now set up this new transect at Coed y Felin. So this is on the back of training that we did the previous year, and volunteering questions, actually being out with Cheshire Wildlife Trust as well, and other conservation bodies, and has sort of gained the experience and built up the confidence to now come out on their own transit route. So we've set up a transit route, and that monitoring has started now, and that's to butterfly monitoring standard, to the level of the butterfly monitoring scheme by Butterfly Conservation. So that's really positive. Just going back, the reptile training has led to the transit route having been set up at Aberdeen, and a couple of initial surveys being done there, and I think that'll be really formalized now in the 2014 season, and we've got a volunteer now taking on the dragonfly surveys at Aberdeen as well. So this is all just really positive expansion on what we're doing on that monitoring side, and we've just had to bite the bullet and invest the time and put the information out there and put the training out there, and we've been really lucky in some cases that we've had people express an interest who already have expertise and experience on doing these surveys. In other cases, we've just been so lucky to have people sign up who don't have the experience but who are so keen and just absorb information like a sponge, and are able to start these things. So it's been a really positive summer on surveys. Then late summer, we did our Deptford pink monitoring at Coed y Felin. Last year we only found 13 individual plants, which was quite disappointing. This year we found 130, so we found 10 times more, and I'm not entirely sure why, because a lot of the management work that I did last year specifically for them, so we scarified the ground for them in patches, we reseeded into those patches, and that's not where we found them. We found them down on the slope where we hadn't done the management. They did seem to like anthills, so that there are species that like disturbance, they like bare grounds. The anthills are creating that, so that's one thing. But I wonder how much survey effort might have played a part, because this year we had more surveyors and we found the plants right from the start, so we definitively knew what we were looking for. And once we found some, we kept finding more, and we were able to find both the second year, the flowering stems, but also the first year, because they've got this biennial life cycle, and the leaves on the first year ones just look really different to the flowering plants. So you've got to have your eye in for both sort of morphotypes, if you like, of the plant. So I wonder whether this year, because we had more people and we knew better what we were doing this year over last year, and we went straight to where we thought we would find them, and we did. And I wonder sort of how much just that experience led to us being able to find more. So maybe last year's count was artificially low. So I'll be really interested to see next year what the numbers are like now that we have that experience. So that was really positive to see as well. Here's a photo of the flower. They're really odd looking plant, very skinny and sort of quite lanky plants. But yeah, quite distinctive once you see them. So coming out of surveys now and looking at the practical work over summer. So we've done quite a bit of footpath work, footpath building, footpath maintenance. So this was at Thol. So any of you who might visit Thol, there was a very muddy patch around the edge of the ponds. We've got this all important edging so that we don't lose our material down into the pond, because it's a calcareous site. It's probably not going to change the water chemistry, but all the same, you need to keep it where you want it. So we've got path building here. This is a photo work in progress of the steps leading down to the river at Llwyd. So some more work done here. There's some steps sort of on the other side at Llwyd as well. Done quite a lot of footpath work at Aberdeen and step work there as well. So across a few sites we've done that. Try and do that over summer when we can't do destructive things. So we'll do fencing and step work and estate management. We've also had a big focus on tree popping at Maes Hiredig. So this is another one where I've learned over my time at the trust. When I first came to the site, it's a really nice looking calcareous grassland. It's just it's really species rich. It's got a nice structure. It's very open. I thought the trust had just absolutely nailed it with this site, and we didn't need to worry about it too much. But then you zoom in and you start sort of looking much more closely, and it's still full of these legacy scrubs. So there's ash, rose, bramble, blackthorn, and hawthorn, and each year it gets cut and it gets grazed, but you can see you've got these really thick, gnarly sort of roots and stems where it gets flailed down and it just grows back each year. And so you end up with these, you get these really long roots. In this case, with the hawthorn, it's going very deep, but a lot of them, they spread out and you get these very long sort of surface roots here. And it takes such a disproportionate amount of time to dig them out. But if we don't, all we're doing is in effect coppicing them. And so we're trying to knock back all this sort of legacy scrub, because if we don't, it'll come back and get reestablished much more quickly. So it's another site, a bit like Gors Maen Llwyd, where actually rather than sort of thinking, oh, we're okay, or oh, we can't possibly deal with it, it's a question of put your foot down on the gas and really invest the time to take these to tackle it, and in this case take these rootstocks out. So in addition to all that work, we also get the sites, as I say, flail collected and grazed as well. Then another late summer task is the balsam bashing over at Llwyd. So here we've got a particularly sort of Jack and the Beanstalk example of balsam, but a lot of them this year actually were very small and easy to miss. And this year we actually ended up, normally we do 3 sessions. This year we did 4 sessions because on the third one we were still finding large numbers, which was surprising because on the second one we were finding very few. So but we hit the area well, and we actually cover, so we cover the river going through Coed Velin up here, marked in red, and then we follow basically on the north side of the or the top side anyway of the A541 here, and we follow it down. We chase it down all the way down to the Antelope Estate by Rydymwyn, and just on the bottom here you can see Rydymwyn Valley Nature Reserve, where our colleagues at Wildground pick up the baton and carry on the balsam pulling through there, and then downstream towards Mould. And this is part of a catchment-wide partnership that we're all involved with to really try and control it through the catchment, and it does seem to be working. There is much less than in previous years, but as I say, this year on that third session we had a lot of very small ones that were popping up, and we were finding in the dense vegetation. So we put that fourth session in to just make sure that that our section we can be confident that we're hitting it hard. So brings us through to autumn, and sort of late summer, early autumn, we're looking at scything. So I've got two sites in particular that we do a cut and a rake on. We've got Thorlachaf, the small section of grassland around the ponds here, and at Coed Velin as well. We will scythe both fields at Coed Velin. And I prefer scything to brush cutting in this context because I think it's a cleaner cut. You get less sort of sawdust arising, so I think you're leaving less material there as enrichment. And if you've got enough people who are able to do it, so I mean it is slower than going in mechanically with the strimmers, but if you've got enough people to do it, I think it does a cleaner cut. You can have more people working closer together than you can with the brush cutters as well, and it's much more peaceful than having all these petrol mowers going. So we do the cut and rakes on these sites, and then at Thol we don't graze because it's too small an area and we don't have it stop proof. But as I say, at Coed Velin, I'm going to be trying to get the aftermath grazing in here. We do some pond management at Thol, so it's not that many of our sites with ponds. There's obviously at Gors Llwyd, there's the lake, there's Llynbrennig, and there's one lone pond by the car park. We've got a few ponds. We've got 5 ponds at Aberdeener, and we've got about 8 ponds at Thol. Say about because it depends a little bit on water levels, whether they merge together or separate out. But there's 8 named ponds here, and we just thin out the vegetation a little bit, just so that the bulrush in particular doesn't get too dominant. Now, we don't want to go in too heavy-handed because it is an important habitat type here, but we just it's just so that the pond doesn't basically succeed over to just being a typha bed, which if you leave it, it can do. So we take about a third out or so each year just to keep it open. And yeah, just another shot of that. And then up at Igraig, we built this dead hedge here actually as a tree safety consideration. So we've got these really mature large beech trees. There's the trio of 3 at Igraig that the site is renowned for, and unfortunately they're riddled with fungi now, and they're starting to fall down. So you can see just at the bottom of this photo where a limb has torn off, and you can see it just on the side. This is a close-up of where it's come off, and you can see the fungi growing in the cracks there. And what you can't see so easily, but the sort of a lot of the white in the tear is where there's fungi. So the mushrooms, if you like, that you see on the main stem are just the fruiting body, but a lot of the majority of the fungi is actually in the tree itself, and you can't normally see anything other than the fruiting body because the tree is encapsulating it. But this is a bit like those children's books where you get the 3D cutout, and you can actually sort of see or certainly when you're on site, and you can see it more closely than my photo, just how riddled it is with the fungi, and a close up of them. So because these trees are starting to fall, but they're not on the main path, but there was like a track that led up to them. They were very popular. We did an assessment of them. I was looking at whether they do need to come down or have limbs removing, and just assessing that safety risk. But because they're not on a main track and there isn't a property next to them, there isn't a road next to them, what we've done instead is we are redirecting the track. So rather than sort of having the desire line go up there towards the trees, we're redirecting it onto another track that leads up to the picnic site and the viewpoint tables, and that way we'll still monitor it. We'll see, whether it's working and whether we're getting desire lines around it. That way we can retain those trees. They can live out the last of their days. We'll keep them as long as we possibly can, rather than bringing them down artificially sooner. So again, it's a bit like with the ash dieback. We're just trying to be as sensitive to the habitats there as we can be within the process of the health and safety that we have to follow. So that's a nice example of it at Y Graig, albeit a very sad example because they're just such gorgeous trees. And then obviously the ash dieback work, we're continuing with our tree surveys and management on that. And then that brings us through autumn and back to winter, back to the end. So that with that loop, that's the end of the presentation I've prepared. So I'll invite Mark in to see if there's any questions.
Thank you for mate. That was fascinating. I like the way that you put it into the seasons, because obviously you did a talk last year about the work you'd done, so it was nice to kind of have that continuity. It was also nice because one of the problems we have with the trust is we do cover such a large area, and we've got 35 reserves all together. I'm still ticking off ones I haven't get to or don't get to very often in my job, and I cover the whole of North Wales. So I was thinking back then when you built the outhouse at Llwyd, the last time I was there we were stuck in the snow and you were pushing my car out. It was the last time I was up there. So it was it was really fascinating to see, because I think a lot of the people in this talk will probably have been to some of the reserves, but they'll only have been at a certain time of the year, so they don't understand what happens all the rest of the time. So no, it was really fascinating, Paul. I have got a couple of comments in the chat. I have asked if anyone else wants to put any questions in, to please put them in. The first one was from David. He basically says you should send NRW the bill for all the sick to control work.
Yeah, I mean, it's not NRW's fault. It's the commercial forestry around it, and obviously, it is what it is. But we are lucky that one of our major neighbours there is Dur Cymru, and they're despite having that forestry land, they are trying to manage it in a much more conservation friendly way, which is really positive. And I'm hopeful that sort of longer term we might be able to get Gors Maen Llwyd, which is a triple SI, into a Section 16 funding agreement, which with NRW, which would help. But yeah, I mean, at the moment we have got a couple of funding sources for the site that are really helping. And if I can if I can forward weight the large tree work and the contractor work to whilst I've got this money, if we can get on top of it with this sort of, as I say, the 6-year plan, 6-year rotation, then it's just a case of having like monthly sessions throughout as long a season as we can manage, to just stay on top of it every year. And I mean, that's obviously, it's a lot of work, but yeah, I think it's not quite as ridiculously unfeasible as my first impressions of the site. So it's exciting to see it come along.
Yeah. David also comments that it's not just a problem at Gors, Maen, Llwyd, it's a problem in other areas in Wales as well, isn't it? So yeah, it's I think that's what he meant by LRW should pick up the bill, because he said it's a bigger problem, isn't it? So Owen in the chat says, great to hear of such good progress on all the reserves. He's curious to know whether you've seen any or monitored any adders on any of the reserves you look after.
Yeah, so there is adder monitoring on a few of the reserves, and I actually got an adder report in this evening just before the presentation. We have got adders on Gors, Maen, Llwyd, and they're a nice feature of the site, but we don't advertise sort of locations in sort of the level of detail that we otherwise might. So for Gors, for example, where we have got monitoring data, I have got some nice heat maps and things, but I just don't put them up on public display because they're a sensitive species, and especially with the talk going up on YouTube afterwards, just to protect what we know about them. But yes, we do have adders on a few of the sites. There is active monitoring for adders, as I say, on a couple of them, and yeah, there's a couple where we plausibly might find them once we get these reptile surveys up and running sort of at full strength. So if you are interested, or if anyone is interested in getting involved with reptile surveys, then do drop me an email. And I mean, it's not the right time of year now, but we're gathering the group, and we're getting ready so that we can do the surveys right from the get-go next season.
Yeah, there are adders on quite a few of our reserves, aren't there? Just not including the ones you monitor and look after, but some of the other ones as well, isn't there? I know obviously there's a couple of the sites in the east we have adders on, and in Gwynedd and places, so they are around, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, the sort of upland heathy habitats are very typical, and especially sort of in the west of the UK. So like, I used to manage a reserve in Peterborough in East Anglia, and adders were sort of in that area. Adders were very few and far between, because it, like, the fenlands just wasn't their thing. But as you go further and further west, and into Wales and into the uplands, they become much more much more likely to encounter them if you're looking, and you know what you're looking for, and in your right sort of place. So but yes, we do have them, and we do monitor for them, and if you're interested in getting involved, then there's absolutely scope to do so. It's just because of the sensitivity of the species, I haven't put more details up on the slides.
That's fair enough. Kate Gibbs says, very pleased to see the teams of volunteers doing such varied work. Lovely to see the new notice boards. Good to keep them nice and clean, she says. And Kate's done an awful lot of work on a lot of our reserves over the years. So yes, Kate, yes, it does make a difference when you can read what the signs say, doesn't it? So Leah also writes, great work, really interesting overview. Are any of the trees on your reserves listed on the Woodland Trust's ancient tree inventory?
I would have to check. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. And then John says, many thanks for the interesting talk. Good to hear the work you're doing.
Thank you.
So, and that's it. So I think we'll wrap it up there, since we've been on for an hour and 20 minutes. So it's getting a bit late. I've got kids to put to bed in my house. So as Paul's left on the screen there's a few little bits for you there. If you want to sign up to the newsletter, become a member, or get involved with the work we do, there's a few lists there. What I will do tomorrow is I will send you all an email, and then with all those links in it, Plus, if there's any other questions you've got for Paul, or if there's any, if you'd like to get involved with the work we do, and maybe come out with us and things like that, just reply to that email and I can pass it on to the right people. Not just in the areas that Paul does, but maybe on some of the other reserves across North Wales and things, or even Cheshire. Just depending where you live, just reply to that email. Any questions you've got, and I'll get it to the right people. We can get back to you. So, but otherwise, thank you very, very much. Yeah, Leah, thank you as well. So yeah, thank you, Paul. Really interesting. It's really good to get that overview. Yeah, because just part of my job is being out and about talking to the public, and it makes my job so much easier when you can show me that work and why we do it, and we can answer those questions that people do have, especially regarding trees coming down at the moment, or why we're grazing certain areas and things like that. So it's really good to have those answers. So thank you, mate.
No problem.
All right, take care. Have a nice evening, everyone, and we'll leave it there. Take care.